Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another one of these afternoon stay-at-home, pray-at-home devotional series at St. Raymond Parish. And today is the feast of St. Teresa of Avila, one of the greatest mystics of the Church, the first female doctor of the Church. She is amazing when it comes to teaching us how to pray. And since we do these mid-afternoon devotionals every single day, I thought, I want to take a break and do something a little bit different today. So today, I want to read to you something St. Teresa of Avila wrote about prayer and counsels concerning prayer to people who are really busy. So it's very pertinent to us. So I want to start by reading that. It's selections from her foundation. So this is kind of an obscure work. If you look at this, collected works of St. Teresa of Avila, right? What I'm reading from is not volume 1, which has her autobiography, or volume 2, which has her interior castle and other famous works. It's volume 3. So these are kind of, you have to really search through this to find something good, but I found an amazing chapter 5 of her Foundations, that I think will help everybody who loves these mid-afternoon devotions, just help you understand what prayer is and how to pray more effectively. So I'm going to start by reading a little bit of this, adding a few comments to it as I read, and then I want to conclude with some of St. Teresa's poetry. And I'm going to read it at the end to conclude as kind of a prayer of poetry written by St. Teresa. And I'll say more about that when we get to it. But first, this amazing chapter on counsels on matters concerning prayer, okay? It is not my intention or thought that what I say here be taken for certain and as an infallible rule, for that would be foolish and things so difficult. Since there are many paths along this way of the Spirit, it could be that I will manage to say certain useful things about some of them. First, I want to treat, according to my poor understanding, of the substance of perfect prayer. For I have run into some for whom it seems the whole business lies in thinking. If they can keep their mind much occupied in God, even though great effort is exerted, they at once think they are spiritual. If, on the contrary, without being able to avoid it, they become distracted, even if for the sake of good things, then they become disconsolate and think they are lost. I do not deny that it is a favor from the Lord if someone is able to be always meditating on his works, and it is good that one strive to do so. However, it must be understood that not all imaginations are by their nature capable of this meditating, but all souls are capable of loving. The soul is not the mind, nor is the will directed by thinking, for this would be very unfortunate. Hence, the soul's progress does not lie in thinking much, but in loving much. Now, how does one acquire this love? By being determined to work and to suffer, and to do so when the occasion arises. It is indeed true that by thinking of what we owe the Lord, of who he is, and of what we are, the soul's determination grows, and that this thinking is very meritorious and appropriate for beginners. But it must be understood that this is true provided that nothing interferes with obedience or benefit to one's neighbor. When either of these two things presents itself, time is demanded, and also the abandonment of what we so much desire to give God, which in our opinion is to be alone thinking of him and delighting in the delights that he gives us. To leave aside these delights for either one of these two things is to give delight to him and do the work for him. As he himself said, "What you did for one of these little ones, you did for me." Well, if this is true, from where does the displeasure proceed, which for the greater part is felt when one has not spent a large part of the day very much withdrawn and absorbed in God, even though we are occupied with these other things? So let me pause for a second and say what St. Teresa is saying here is we all have this image in our mind of, in order to pray, we have to set aside time, we have to become like a nun or a monk in a cloister and pray, dedicate time to thinking about God. And when we don't do that, when we're distracted with helping our neighbor or doing some activity, sometimes we feel a little pang of guilt, like I'm not praying enough, I didn't spend an hour in prayer today, I didn't spend half an hour in prayer today. This is what she's addressing right here now. Where do those pangs of guilt come from when we're not spending as much time in prayer as we think we should, thinking about God? Okay, so that's what she's answering here. And she's going to have two. The first one, and main one, is the very subtle self-love that is mixed in here. See, this self-love does not allow one to understand what it is to want to please ourselves rather than God. For clearly, after a soul begins to taste how sweet the Lord is, it is more pleasing for the body to be resting without work, and for the soul to be receiving delight. O charity of those who truly love this Lord and know their own nature, how little rest they can have if they see they may play a little part in getting even one soul to make progress and to love God more, or in consoling it, or in taking away some danger from it. How poorly would it then rest with this particular rest of its own? And when it cannot help with deeds, it will do so with prayer, begging the Lord for the many souls that it is sad to see being lost. The soul loses its delight and counts the loss as gain, for it doesn't think about its own satisfaction, but rather about how it can best do the Lord's will. So she continues, I know personally some individuals who brought me to understand this truth when I was greatly distressed to see myself with so little time. And I thus was sorry for them to see they were so occupied with so many business matters and things that obedience commanded them. I was thinking to myself, and even said so, that it wasn't possible in the midst of so much commotion for the Spirit to grow, for at that time they didn't have much Spirit. O Lord, how different are your paths from our clumsy imaginings, and how from a soul that is already determined to love you and is abandoned into your hands, you do not want anything but that it obey, that it inquire well into what is for your greater service, and that it desire this. There's no need for it to be seeking out paths or choosing them, for its will is yours. You, my Lord, take up this care of guiding it to where it receives the most benefit. There was a person to whom I spoke a few days ago who, for about 15 years, was kept so busy through obedience with work, in occupations, and government, that in all those years he didn't remember having had one day for himself, although he tried the best he could to keep a pure conscience and have some periods each day for prayer. His soul in its inclination is one of the most obedient I have seen, and so he communicates the spirit of obedience to all those with whom he deals. The Lord has repaid him well, for he has found that he has, without knowing how, that same precious and desirable liberty of spirit that the perfect have. In it, they find all happiness that could be wanted in this life, for in desiring nothing, they possess all. Nothing on earth do they fear or desire. Neither do trials disturb them, nor do consolations move them. In sum, nothing can take away their peace, because these souls depend only on God. And this is not the only person, for I have known others of the same sort, whom I had not seen for some or many years. In asking them about how they had spent these years, I learned that the years were all spent in the fulfillment of the duties of obedience and charity. On the other hand, I saw such improvement in spiritual things that I was amazed. Well, come now, my daughters. Don't be sad when obedience draws you to involvement in exterior matters. Know that if it is in the kitchen, the Lord walks among the pots and pans, helping you both interiorly and exteriorly. So beautiful. It's so beautiful. I believe that, Since the devil sees there is no path that leads more quickly to the highest perfection than obedience, he sets up many annoyances and difficulties under the color of good. Note this well, and you will see clearly that I am speaking the truth. The highest perfection obviously does not consist in interior delights or in great raptures or in visions or in the spirit of prophecy, but in having our will so much in conformity with God's will that there is nothing we know he wills that we do not want with all our desire, and in accepting the bitter as happily as we do the delightful, when we know that his majesty desires it. This seems most difficult, and indeed it truly is difficult. But love has this strength if it is perfect. For we forget about pleasing ourselves in order to please the one we love. And here she starts to conclude. She says, so much could be said here that we would never finish dealing with this interior battle and all that the devil, the world, and our own sensuality do to make us twist reason. Okay, now, that was the first one, right? The first thing that makes us feel guilty when we don't have enough time for prayer that we think we should is this subtle self-love, because we want to set aside time for prayer so we can get that interior consolation. But St. Teresa says, no, don't think that way. It's just your self-love that makes you want to set aside so much time and that makes you think only nuns or only cloistered nuns or only priests or only monks can be holy because they can set aside so much time for prayer. No, that's a subtle self-love distracting you. Now, here's the second reason we sometimes feel guilty for not having giant blocks of time to pray. The second reason, it seems to me, for this displeasure is that since in solitude there are fewer occasions to offend the Lord, it seems the soul in its journey is freer from sin. For if it is fearful of offending him, it finds the greatest consolation in not having anything to make it stumble. And certainly this seems to me reason enough for desiring not to have conversation with anyone, unless it's about God's great favors and delights. So, here's the second reason in a nutshell. We feel like we should be spending a lot of time in prayer in our inner room and set aside an hour each day. But she says, when we don't do that, part of the reason we feel guilty is because we know there's greater chance we're going to fall if we're out there doing good and spending our lives in obedience, doing God's will. Okay, she continues, here, my daughters, is where love will be seen, not hidden in corners, but in the midst of the occasions of falling. And believe me that even though there may be more faults, and even some slight losses, our gain will be incomparably greater. For people who are always recollected in solitude, however holy in their own opinion they may be, don't know whether they are patient or humble, nor do they have the means of knowing this. How could it be known whether a man were valiant if he had not seen, and if he's not seen in battle? St. Peter thought he was very courageous. See how he acted when the occasion presented itself, right? He denied Christ 3 times. But it came through that experience, not trusting at all in himself. And as a result, he trusted in God and subsequently suffered the martyrdom about which we know. St. Teresa continues here, I consider one day of humble self-knowledge a greater favor from the Lord, even though the day may have cost us numerous afflictions and trials, than many days of prayer. Moreover, the true lover loves everywhere, and is always thinking of the beloved. It would be a hard thing to bear if we were able to pray only when off in some corner. It's necessary to be on one's guard and careful in the performance of good works by having frequent interior recourse to God, even though these works are done in obedience and charity. And let souls believe me that it is not the length of time spent in prayer that benefits one, when the time is spent as well in good works. It is a great help in preparing the soul for the enkindling of love. The soul may thereby be better prepared in a very short time than through many hours of reflection. All must come from his hand. May he be blessed forever. That's such a beautiful passage, and it's so helpful in today's world where we feel like we have no time at all. Everybody's crunched for time because we're always connected 24/7 in a way we never have before. But St. Teresa says, you gotta be careful and you gotta guard yourself against these two really subtle temptations that make us think we can only pray if we go hide in a corner. She says, that desire to think prayer can only be done hidden in a room by herself in silence comes from, first, a self-love that just wants the pleasure of meditating on God. And two, it comes from fear. The fear that if we're not in our room meditating, we're out in the world getting dirty and making mistakes and sinning and needing to get back to confession. So we have to be careful of that. Everybody's called to holiness. We are all called to become saints, right? And so you can't think that I can't pray because I don't have time. Like she said, right? I love it. God, the Lord walks among the pots and pans, helping you both interiorly and exteriorly. Everything you do, God is imbued and with you and holding you and loving you, and you have to be in conversation with him through it all. Okay. Now, to conclude, I want to share a little bit of St. Teresa's poetry. She has amazing poetry. And I just want to share 3 short little poems and then 1 bigger poem. But before I do that, I'm going to change our little thing here. This is a beautiful painting, but I want to put Bernini's beautiful sculpture up here for you to look at while I'm reading the poetry. The Ecstasy of St. Teresa. I think I got it centered pretty good. Okay. Now, St. Teresa's poetry, so much of it was lost because she would just scribble it down on little notes and pass it around at her religious community's recreation sometimes. She didn't have a giant notebook filled with poems, but we have a few, and I would like to share some with you. 3 short little ones here. But I loved this little introduction here that described St. Teresa's poetry writing. This is what the commentator says here. In her ardent moments of love, Teresa was not interested in writing poems for their own sake. She wrote them as a release for the mystical fire she could no longer contain in her heart. And that's so true. I'm not going to read these in their original language so it doesn't flow as beautifully as it could, but I still think it's absolutely beautiful. I'll start with the 3 small ones, and then we'll conclude with the bigger one. So the first small one goes thus. Myself surrendered and given, the exchange is this. My beloved is for me, and I am for my beloved. When the gentle hunter wounded and subdued me, in love's arms my soul fallen, new life receiving. Thus did I exchange, my beloved is for me, and I am for my beloved. The arrow he drew full of love, my soul was one with her Creator. Other love I want not, surrendered now to my God, that my beloved is for me, and I am for my beloved. The second poem is called Loving Colloquy. If the love you have for me is like the love I have for you, my God, what detains me? Oh, what is delaying you? Soul, what is it you desire of me? My God, nothing other than to see you. What is it that you fear more than self? What I fear most is the loss of you. The soul hidden in God, what has it to desire, save to love more and more, and in love all hidden again and again to love you? One all-possessing love I ask, my God, my soul centered in you, making a delightful nest, a resting place most pleasing. This next poem is a short one called Happy the Enamored Heart. Happy the enamored heart, thoughts centered on God alone, renouncing every creature for him, finding in him glory and contentment, living forgetful of self, in God is all its intention. Happy, and so joyfully it journeys through waves of this stormy sea. Okay, this next one's a little bit bigger, but it's so beautiful. It's about as long as the other three put together, so it's not some epic, but I think it's a beautiful prayer. I think it's an absolutely beautiful prayer. One of the things I like to suggest to people is to find some type of motto, some type of single prayer that's less than 10 words that encapsulates where you're at this moment, that you can pray no matter what's going on in your life. If you're happy, you can pray this prayer. If things are falling apart, you can pray this prayer. It's a prayer that's a motto that you can come back to and always rely on to help you stay close to God. And I have a prayer like that. It's just conform my will to thine. And I pray that to God whenever I'm in the midst of some crazy situation. Conform my will to thine. Conform my will to thine. Every time I receive communion, conform my will to thine. It's great to have a prayer like that. And this last poem I'm going to read from St. Teresa is called In the Hands of God. And it's just a beautiful prayer. It's poetry, but it's a prayer. So here we go. I am yours and born for you. What do you want of me? Majestic, sovereign, unending wisdom, kindness pleasing to my soul, God sublime, one being good. Behold this one so vile, singing of her love of you. What do you want of me? Yours you made me, yours you saved me, yours you endured me, yours you called me, yours you awaited me. Yours I did not stray. What do you want of me? Good Lord, what do you want of me? What is this wretch to do? What work is this sinful slave to do? Look at me, sweet love, look at me. What do you want of me? In your hand I place my heart, body, life, and soul, deep feelings and affections mine, spouse, redeemer sweet, myself offered now to you. What do you want of me? Give me death, give me life, health or sickness, honor or shame, war or swelling peace, weakness or full strength. Yes, to these I say, what do you want of me? Give me wealth or want, delight or distress, happiness or gloominess, heaven or hell, sweet life, sun unveiled, to you I give all. What do you want of me? Give me, if you will, prayer, or let me know dryness, an abundance of devotion, or if not, then barrenness. In you alone, sovereign majesty, I find my peace. Do, what do you want of me? Give me then wisdom, or for love, ignorance, years of abundance, or hunger and famine, darkness or sunlight. Move me here or there. What do you want of me? If you want me to rest, I desire it for love. If to labor, I will die working. Sweet love, say where, how, and when. What do you want of me? Calvary or Tabor, give me desert or fruitful land, as Job in suffering, or John at your breast. Barren or fruited vine, whatever be your will, what do you want of me? Be I Joseph chained, or as Egypt's governor, David pained, or exalted high, Jonas drowned, or Jonah freed. What do you want of me? Silent or speaking, fruit-bearing or barren, my wounds shown by the law, rejoicing in the tender gospel, sorrowing or exulting, you alone live in me. What do you want of me? Yours I am, for you I was born. What do you want of me? It's beautiful. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Thank you for joining me for this mid-afternoon devotion, and I will see you next time.